Good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today we have some important articles from the Hindu newspaper. So we'll try to discuss all those important news articles along with one mains practice question. So in this mains practice question, we'll try to understand and also identify what are the different components of the question and how we can actually deconstruct the question and how we can answer the question. So that's how you can get important insights on how to write answer or how to develop the skill to write the good answer. So this question is based on today's editorial that is given in the Hindu newspaper, and this editorial is about the simultaneous elections, which is also called as one nation and one election. So the question is, critically analyze whether simultaneous elections offer more benefits than frequent elections. Right? So this is the question. So we all knew what exactly is the concept of simultaneous elections. So generally in the simultaneous elections, what happens? So the elections for the Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly are being synchronized, right? So they takes place at a one single point of time. However, we have a federal setup, we have a federal structure. So in this federal setup, so general elections are held at a different point of time, and state elections for different states also held at a different point of time. However, the central government has constituted a committee under the chairmanship of former President Ramnath Kovind, and this committee has looked into the feasibility of conducting simultaneous polls, and it has also submitted its recommendations to the president. Right? So in this context, we'll try to understand this question. So we'll try to deconstruct the question as well. Now in this question, it is very important that we need to write what are the disadvantages of conducting simultaneous polls. So how it affects the federal structure of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, in S.R. Bommai judgment, the Supreme Court has held that federalism is a basic structure. So it is part of the basic structure doctrine that has been given in the Keshwananda Bharati judgment. Now in this context, you need to briefly give an introduction about the simultaneous polls. Now what exactly the idea or the concept of simultaneous polls, and what are the disadvantages of simultaneous polls? And then you could also write some advantages of the simultaneous polls, and it is always better if you can give examples along with those points, right? So examples actually enhance the legitimacy and credibility of those points, right? So it is always advised that you should write examples as well along with those respective points. If you have data, so you can also mention the data, right? So data further enrich your answer. Now let's try to discuss that. So when you are writing introduction for this particular question, so as I have already told you what is one nation, one election, and we have also discussed this multiple number of times in the past as well. So one nation, one election proposal seeks to synchronize elections to the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, right? So elections for the Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly would be held at a one single point of time. However, the proponents of these simultaneous polls, they are arguing that conducting simultaneous polls would substantially reduce the total election related expenditure or election related cost. However, it is not free from the challenges. There are certain concerns as well. Now, what are those concerns? The concerns that this could further centralize power, right? So as of now, in our federal setup, states very often level allegations against the center that central government has been very often bringing or taking up measures that has been leading to the concentration of powers or centralization of power. However, some concerns of simultaneous polls that it could further centralize power and it could undermine the federal structure, and that has been guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. Now, before discussing the disadvantages with simultaneous polls, so we'll try to understand some benefits of simultaneous polls, right? So benefits of simultaneous polls followed by the disadvantages of simultaneous polls. However, if you look at this image, it is being suggested that the central government is very firm to conduct simultaneous elections by 2029 general elections, right? So elections for the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies would be held at a one single point of time. And in fact, these simultaneous elections also require amendment to the Indian Constitution. So amending the Indian Constitution would be done in two steps. So in the first step, simultaneous elections will be held to Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, right? So in the first step, simultaneous elections would be held for Lok Sabha as well as state legislative assemblies. And in the second step, along with Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies, elections to municipalities and panchayats, so they will also be synchronized with the Lok Sabha elections and state legislative assembly elections. So for that particular purpose, it is expected that a new article into the Indian Constitution would be inserted, that would be Article 324A of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, there will be a single electoral roll. So as of now, there are different electoral rolls. So electoral roll for Lok Sabha elections, electoral roll for the state legislative assembly elections, and electoral roll for the local body elections as well. So as of now, so there are multiple electoral rolls. But after these simultaneous polls started implementing, the government or the Election Commission of India would come up with one single roll and one single election ID. And in case a hung house or hung assembly, now what generally is called as hung house? Now hung house in the sense that if imagine that after election no party gets a clear majority, right? So in order to form the government, party must get a clear majority. So if no party gets a clear majority, that would lead to the hung assembly, and fresh elections will be conducted for the rest of the term. And in fact, so this is how the simultaneous elections and the proposal to conduct simultaneous elections has been recommended by the Ramnath Kovind panel. Now, apart from Ramnath Kovind panel, Law Commission has recommended simultaneous elections, and National Commission to Review Working of the Constitution has also recommended simultaneous elections. Niti Aayog has also recommended simultaneous elections because of the benefits or the advantages that the simultaneous elections actually have. Now we'll try to understand what are the benefits or the advantages of simultaneous elections, because it is also very important, right? So because of that particular reason, the central government has decided to conduct simultaneous elections even though there is opposition from some states, particularly DMK of Tamil Nadu, Trinamool Congress. Now why those respective state governments have been opposing? Because in those states, regional parties have a huge dominance, and it is also expected that the national issues would trump over the regional issues, and that would benefit the national political parties or the ruling party. So that's why those regional political parties and states are opposing the simultaneous elections. Now, what are the benefits? It is expected that conducting simultaneous elections would substantially reduce the expenditure, right? So electoral expenditure is one of the issue, and it is also very important that we must reduce the expenditure on the elections so that the funds can be utilized in a more prudent manner, right? So prudent manner in the sense that we could use those funds in social welfare programs in various social sectors such as education, healthcare, and skill development, right? So because as of now, the Election Commission of India has been conducting elections multiple times, right? So multiple times in the sense that first general elections would be held, and after general elections different states are going for elections at different points of time in every year, right? So because of that particular reason, conducting simultaneous elections would save a substantial amount of public money, and that public money can be reinvested in social sector. And secondly, it could also prevent prolonged imposition of model code of conduct. So we all knew that whenever Election Commission of India announces a schedule for conducting elections, whether it is by-elections or state legislative assembly elections or general elections, Election Commission of India also announces the model code of conduct. So whenever there is a model code of conduct in place, the governments cannot announce new welfare programs, and that also hinder the government. So because of that particular reason, there's no need to conduct elections multiple times, right? So one single election has to be conducted. So therefore, model code of conduct will not be imposed in different parts of the country throughout the year. That is another concept behind conducting simultaneous elections. So the next concept is minimize disruptions to the public life being caused by frequent polls, right? So frequent polls also not good for the public as well, right? Because it could cause disruptions to the normal public life, and that also impact their day-to-day activities, and that also impact the overall development as well. And because of that particular reason also, the idea of simultaneous election has been mooted. And apart from that, crucial manpower can be freed up for other essential tasks. Now whenever elections are being conducted at multiple intervals, so generally what happens that you need security forces, right, to ensure elections are conducted smoothly and elections are conducted in a free and fair manner. And you also need the administrative staff. So frequently we need to divert the administrative staff from other departments and also the security forces, and that's where it has been creating problem. Regularly deploying these staff from different departments to election duties, and that has also been impacting the performance and efficiency of those organizations or departments. And apart from that, governments, when simultaneous elections are being held, governments can focus more on governance rather than constant election campaigning, right? So no need to go for campaign. For example, the ruling party in a state or ruling party in a center, the leaders no need to regularly go for campaign if elections are held once in a 5 years for Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, and that is the idea behind this. And even it also reduces disruption to essential services, thus mitigating the policy paralysis as well. These are some benefits that the experts have been giving because of conducting simultaneous elections. However, it is important for us to look into the disadvantages of conducting simultaneous elections, because that is very, very important. So we already discussed the introduction of simultaneous elections. However, what are the disadvantages of simultaneous elections? What are the cons of conducting simultaneous elections? So firstly, it could diminish states' autonomy. So that is very important that we need to look into how it could diminish states' autonomy, because Constitution itself has provided for the division of powers, right? So 7th schedule talks about division of powers to the center and states, right? So at the state level also there is a parliamentary form of government, and even at the central level also a parliamentary form of government. So synchronizing elections could further reduce states' ability to independently govern their electoral timelines, and this could further weaken their overall autonomy. And in fact, in Indian Constitution, Article 172, it provides for states flexibility to dissolve their respective assemblies. However, when simultaneous elections come into effect, so that could restrict this Article 172 and the power of the state legislatures to dissolve their respective assemblies, and that is one of the most critical issue here. And apart from that, a very big concern with conducting simultaneous elections is that the national issues could actually overshadow the regional issues, right? Because elections for the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies are held at a one single point of time, right? So there is a fear and concern that if elections are held at a one single point of time, the national issues would have more weight compared to the regional issues, and that could benefit the ruling party in power at the center, right? So this is another argument that is being proposed. And apart from that, so it is also said that there is increased influence of national political parties instead of the state political parties. Now, in fact, if you look at some states such as West Bengal, where Trinamool Congress has the dominance, in Tamil Nadu, DMK is dominance, and in Andhra Pradesh, there is also two regional parties. So states where regional parties are being dominant, so it is said that those states have been opposing conducting simultaneous elections because it could increase influence of national political parties and diminish the influence of the state political parties, and that is one key concern here, right? So combined elections or simultaneous elections could significantly strengthen national political parties at the cost of regional parties, and thereby skewing power in favor of the center. And apart from that, it could also undermine the regional representation, right? So how it could undermine regional representation? Because now when national issues are started overshadowing the regional issues, when we conduct simultaneous elections, it would be very difficult for the regional political parties and leaders who belong to those regional political parties or local leaders, right? So it would become very difficult for them to win the elections taking the agenda of the localized issues or the local concerns, right? Because it is a joint election, right? So national issues would have more weightage, and that could even lead to the underrepresentation of diverse voices in the governance. And this is also another major concern of conducting simultaneous elections. And apart from that, it is also expected that conducting simultaneous elections would substantially reduce the accountability of state governments, right? So how it could reduce the accountability of state governments? Because when elections are being held at multiple intervals, then there will be an opportunity for the people to scrutinize the government policies at scrutiny, because they're going for the elections at multiple points of time. But once elections are held, so next 5 years elections will not be held. Right, so that is another major issue. So holding elections at different intervals ensures continuous accountability of the state governments, and simultaneous elections could reduce this check. Because remember, when we are talking about the state, municipal, panchayat elections and also state legislative elections held at a one single point of time. Imagine that state legislative assembly elections held at a different time and panchayats and municipality elections held at a different point of time. So in that case, people get the opportunity to express their views on the government, right? But now when we synchronize the elections of state legislative assembly, panchayats and local bodies, so there will be no such scope. And apart from that, there will be new challenges for the coalition governments as well, right? Because when the coalition governments would usually form, when alliances are usually formed. So whenever it is believed that one single political party may not be able to get adequate majority to form the government, so they would form the alliances, they would form the coalitions. Now the problem with the coalition government or the alliances, whether pre-poll alliances or post-poll alliances, is that there's no stability. So stability is very important. There's no stability, and simultaneous elections could result in coalition governments, right? So both at the center as well as the state levels, and thereby it could create governance instability. For example, imagine that government is being formed at the central level, and this government is a coalition government. So coalition government in the sense that political party A, political party B, and political party C, they've come together and they have formed government at the center. And someone from political party C says that a senior leader from our political party should be given prime minister. So some people from political party B says no, senior leader from our political party should be made prime minister. So there will be an instability, right? So there will be a conflict among these political parties, and that could ultimately lead to one political party withdrawing support to the other political party in the government itself, and that could lead to the political instability and governance instability, and that is the major issue here. I hope you have understood this. And judicial constraints, there are some judicial constraints as well, because as of now, if you look at Indian judiciary, it has been playing a proactive role. Indian judiciary has been playing a proactive role, and in fact Indian judiciary is also accused of judicial overreach as well. And in fact judiciary may have to frequently intervene to ensure political stability when simultaneous elections are being conducted, right? So in case of a dissolution, in case of a hung assemblies, in case of a corruption, horse trading, anti-defection petitions are not taken into consideration. So there may be increased instances of judicial interventions into these issues. So therefore it is not free from the challenges. There are a lot of such challenges. It is good that if the central government is going for the reform of conducting elections, right, a new method, a new manner of conducting elections, but it is very important that the central government need to take into account autonomy of the state, right? So autonomy of the state is very, very important in this context, and it should be taken in federal spirit. So federal spirit should never be neglected. So autonomy of the state should be taken into consideration, and simultaneous elections needs to be conducted respecting the federal spirit of the Indian Constitution. So that's how you can write a way forward as well, or a conclusion as well in the answer. Now let's move on to discuss some important articles that are being given in the Hindu newspaper, right? So the first article is about judges and holding judges accountable, particularly judges from the higher judiciary. And in fact, judiciary in India very often facing the criticism that judges are not accountable, right? And in fact, there are instances of corruption and misuse of power in the higher judiciary itself. However, recently an incident came to light where a high court judge, his name is Justice Shekhar Kumar Yadav, he attended an Hindu Parishad event. So in this Hindu Parishad event, he made a remarks which shows his biasness against the Muslim community. So judges needs to be neutral, judges needs to be impartial, right? So they should not hold prejudices against any particular community. But this is a very serious issue with respect to the judiciary, and that's where there is an increased demand and debate about holding judges accountable. So Justice Shekhar Kumar Yadav has given a speech at Vishwa Hindu Parishad event. So he attended a Vishwa Hindu Parishad event, and in that particular event, so he made some remarks that indicate his biased attitude against the Muslim community. And that has raised a lot of concerns about challenges in holding higher court judges accountable in India. So how can we make sure that those judges of the higher judiciary, Supreme Court and High Court, are accountable? How can we actually hold them accountable? Now, why it is important to hold judges accountable, right? So we are living in a democracy, and we have a living constitution. We have a written constitution, and this constitution has provided for an independent judiciary. And in fact, Indian judiciary, or the Supreme Court of India, is called as the most powerful court in the world because of the powers it has received from the Indian constitution. So in this context, India is a secular nation, right? So in secular nation, people from different ethnicities, different languages, and different religions and different regions, they live together in harmony. So judges should not be, judges should not have such biases against any community. They need to be impartial. They need to be neutral. And that is actually the essence of judiciary, or people who are holding higher position in the judiciary. So judges are considered as the guardians of the constitution. They're being called as the guardians of Indian constitution, and they are also expected to exhibit highest ethical standards to maintain public trust in the judiciary. Now, as of now, it is said that Indian people actually have a lot of trust on Indian judiciary, right? So since the public actually expect a lot from Indian judiciary, it is very important that we need to hold the judges accountable. And they need to exhibit the highest ethical standards as well to maintain the same public trust in the judiciary. And in fact, accountability also ensures that judiciary has been acting in a fair and impartial manner. So judiciary is not acting in an arbitrary manner. Judiciary has not been showing biasness towards one particular community in a diverse society in India, right? So in fact, if judiciary shows such bias, so it would indicate that it has been, this particular practice has been undermining the democratic institutions in India. There's no doubt that judicial independence is very, very important, because judicial independence protects the constitution, constitutional ethos, it ensures constitutionalism. It is also like a checks and balances on different organs of the government, right? But unchecked power of the judiciary can even lead to the misconduct and corruption as well. So this has been seen in cases like Justice V. Ramaswamy and Justice Soumitra Sen cases, right? So unchecked power in the hands of any institution or organization would necessarily lead to misconduct and corruption and misuse of their respective powers. Now, in this context, accountability of the judiciary is very important to reinforce public confidence, because it could reinforce public confidence on the higher judiciary, especially in a democracy where judiciary acts as check on other branches of the government. Judiciary very often acts as a check on the other branches of the government, and because of that reason, accountability in higher judiciary is very, very important. Now we'll understand some accountability mechanisms for judges, which the procedure that has been provided by a Judges Enquiry Act of 1968 to remove judges. So how judges are being impeached or how judges are being removed. So that has been a detailed procedure has been provided in the Judges Enquiry Act 1968, and in fact legal experts have been calling for reforming the Judges Enquiry Act of 1968. So to hold judges accountable, to hold higher judiciary accountable, right? So in fact the process of holding judges accountable is governed by Judges Enquiry Act of 1968, as I have already told you. And in fact it has been supported by Article 124 and subclause 4 and Article 124 subclause 5, 217 and 218 of the Constitution, right? So Article 217, 218 of the Constitution along with Article 124 clause 4 and Article 124 clause 5 of the Indian Constitution talks about the holding judges, holding higher judiciary accountable. However, judges of the higher judiciary can be removed only on 2 grounds. So what are those 2 grounds based on which judges of the higher judiciary can be removed? The first ground is proved misbehavior or incapacity, right? So these are 2 grounds based on which judges of the High Court and the Supreme Court can be removed. However, whether a judge can be guilty of proved misbehavior or incapacity, it can be determined by a 3-member committee. So it will be decided by a 3-member committee, and this 3-member committee consisting of Supreme Court judge, a Supreme Court judge and Chief Justice of a High Court and also an eminent jurist, right? So eminent jurist. So this particular committee will decide whether one particular judge of Supreme Court or High Court, they proved guilty of proved misbehavior or incapacity. Now generally what happens is that the process of removal of judges of the Supreme Court or High Court can be initiated by any house of the parliament, whether it is Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha, right? So in order to initiate the process in Rajya Sabha, at least 50 members of the Rajya Sabha need to sign a resolution, and that particular resolution has to be submitted to the chairman of Rajya Sabha. Right. So however, it is up to the chairman of Rajya Sabha whether to accept this resolution or reject this resolution, and the very same thing also happens in the Lok Sabha as well, right? So 100 members need to sign a resolution, and they submit the resolution to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, and it is up to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha whether to accept or reject that particular resolution. So if any house accepted that resolution, then a 3-member committee would be constituted to investigate the charges against the judge, right? So once this committee has proved that this particular judge is guilty of such misconduct or such misbehavior or incapacity, then it will be put to vote in the Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. However, it requires at least 2/3 majority to be passed, right? So it required 2/3 majority in each house, both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and then ultimately it needs to be signed by the president as well, and then the judge, the concerned judge, stands to be impeached or removed. Don't you think that it is a very, very complex procedure? And that makes judges less accountable to the public, right? So there is a need to look into this procedure, and there is also a need to revisit the provisions of Judges Enquiry Act 1968. So however, there are certain reforms that are being required to ensure accountability of the judges. Now what are the reforms that are being required? Now, first and foremost, for example, if there are allegations against any judge, if that particular judge is resigned, so post reservation also investigation against such judge about his misconduct needs to be continued. Investigation should not be stopped even if he or she resigned after allegations, right? So that is very, very important to hold judges accountable, because once they resign, what they do, they evade the accountability. It should never happen. And apart from that, legal reforms must ensure there will be a continuation of the proceedings to establish their guilt or innocence irrespective of the resignation. And apart from that, there should be an independent mechanism or independent body that needs to be established, and this independent body should have a more robust framework to investigate the allegations without requiring parliamentary approvals at the initial stage. So there will be no parliamentary approvals at the initial stage that is actually happening as of now. So this independent body would investigate the allegations against the judges. So that would make this process little bit simpler, and that also ensures the judges of the higher judiciary accountable. So independent in the sense that there should not be high influence or more influence of judiciary, executive or legislative. This should be an independent body, and this also investigate the matters independently. And revisiting Judges Inquiry Act is also very, very important. So there are certain amendments that are required to address the procedural delays in the removal of judges and also reduce political interference in the impeachment motions. Right, so that is very, very important, and I hope you have understood this. Now we'll proceed on to the next very important topic. So that is with respect to Bhopal gas tragedy. By December this year, Bhopal gas tragedy is, it has been 40 years since this Bhopal gas tragedy has happened this month. Right, so because of this particular reason, it is very important to understand what is this Bhopal gas tragedy. Now, why it has happened, what are the impacts of Bhopal gas tragedy, and how government has been responding to this tragedy. So it is very important for us to understand. Right, so Bhopal gas tragedy, you might have heard about this tragedy. And in fact, this Bhopal gas tragedy is considered as worst industrial disaster in the world because it has led to the death of hundreds of people. And in fact, number of other people have been facing a lot of problems because of this industrial disaster. Right? So this has occurred in the Union Carbide India Limited. And Union Carbide India Limited is a pesticide plant. It is a pesticide manufacturing plant that is located in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. Right? So it has happened in Union Carbide India Limited, and Union Carbide India Limited is a pesticide manufacturing plant that is located in Bhopal and Madhya Pradesh. And in fact, this event, that is Bhopal gas tragedy, has a lasting imprint on the public health. It not just on the public health but also on the environment, but it also has the lasting impact on the industrial safety practices. Right, so this is a major industrial accident, and there was an international pressure on India at that point of time. So because of that reason, the government of India has come up with strict industrial safety norms, regulations. So that's why it has a lasting imprint on the public health. However, it has killed thousands of people instantly. So at the spot, it has killed, hundreds of people. And in fact, there are still a lot of survivors with disability, with blindness, with number of other problems because of this Bhopal gas tragedy. And in fact, the generations have been suffering this Bhopal gas tragedy incident. So I'll try to briefly explain what has happened in this Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984. So initially we have just discussed that this Bhopal gas tragedy has happened in a pesticide manufacturing plant, that is Union Carbide India Limited. So this Union Carbide India Limited is owned by an Indian subsidiary of American firm, that is Union Carbide Corporation, and this Union Carbide India Limited was established in the year 1969 in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. However, what is the primary objective of Union Carbide India Limited? The primary objective is produce pesticide. The name of the pesticide that this company produces is 7, right? So this is the pesticide that this company produces, and it has a brand name called Carbaryl. Okay, so this is the brand name of the pesticide 7-carbaryl. And in fact, the production process of this pesticide 7 has involved use of methyl isocyanide, a chemical, as an intermediary, right? So remember that this is very important, right? So this release of methyl isocyanide, so that is an intermediary which is being used to manufacture, to produce pesticide called 7, is actually responsible for the deaths of thousands of people in Bhopal, right? So this Bhopal gas tragedy was occurred in 2nd and 3rd December 1984. Now 2nd, what exactly happened was 2nd December midnight, around 40 tons of methyl isocyanide. It is a toxic gas, right? So around 40 tons of methyl isocyanide gas has leaked into the atmosphere over several hours on the 2nd December midnight. People were sleeping, right? So people were sleeping, and because of that reason it has further increased the mortality, because people started inhaling this toxic gas, and people woke up coughing, choking, and even experiencing severe burns, irritation in their eyes and lungs. So they started feeling all these different symptoms, and in just few hours hundreds of people died in Bhopal itself because of the toxic nature of the methyl isocyanide, right? So hundreds of people died, and number of other people are also hospitalized after this particular incident. So even because of the harmful nature of the methyl isocyanide, so number of people became disabled. So this incident left people with many health diseases, respiratory issues, malified blindness, that has resulted in exposure to toxic gas. So because they are being exposed to the toxic gas. Now what are the causes of this Bhopal gas tragedy that has happened in 1984? So in fact, as we have already discussed, that this tragedy is considered as world's worst industrial disaster because it is associated with the loss of human life. Hundreds of thousands of people are being died, and its environmental and economic impact. And in fact, it has been identified that the major reason for the Bhopal gas tragedy, the technical failures in this Union Carbide company, right? So not just technical failures, but also managerial negligence, and also the systematic issues which are existed in this company, and all these factors come together responsible for the emission of methyl isocyanide, a toxic gas. And Union Carbide plant in Bhopal was not designed to handle hazardous chemicals like methyl isocyanide, right? So they were not designed to handle such hazardous chemicals, and in fact multiple tanks are actually connected, right? So leakage in one tank means the gas in other tanks would also and it would start released into the atmosphere. And in fact, the refrigeration system has been shut down to cut costs, and flight tower was also out of service. So they planned to reduce the cost, the expenditure, and because of that reason they did not follow adequate safety measures in this company. So Union Carbide Corporation prioritized profits over public safety. Now imagine if the very same thing happened in any